a lifestyle. Sports cards and we live now. Jeremy Lee in the building and every guest that you ever needed. Sports cards after hours keep the hobby heated. Updates, hobby talk like you never seen it. Sports cards live and none could ever beat it. Sports cards is a lifestyle. Sports cards and we live now. Welcome to another episode of Sports Cards Live with your host, Jeremy Lee.
All right, everybody. Welcome to episode number 200 of Sports Cards Live. It is Saturday night, September the 30th, 2023. My name is Jeremy Lee. I would like to thank everybody who tuned in last time. Our guest was none other than Dr. James Beckett. That was an excellent episode. Check that out on the YouTube channel. Next Saturday on the show, Ray Schulte, Director of Communications for the National, among other things, will be our guest. I would like to ask you to join close to 500,000 people who have downloaded the Center Stage app across both iOS and Android for quick comps and card management features. Their app is the fastest and most accurate at card shows or at home to help you price your cards, build, organize, share your collections with friends, and find other collectors to follow using their social sharing features. They have grading partnerships and marketplace features are coming soon. So check out their Instagram account and join me in supporting the great team they have and the innovation they are undertaking. Also, use protection, practice safe swaps. Veriswap is an app and middleman service that lets you securely trade cards through the mail. Every transaction up to $1 million in value is fully insured by their guarantee. To use Veriswap, you upload your inventory, make trade, partial trade, or full cash offers to negotiate with thousands of traders already on the platform. Check them out on iOS and Android. They launched their live card show feature that lets dealers pre-list their inventory in the app. And when you're at a show, you can search the floor for items you want with shows that they are partnered with. As part of a special offer, your first trade in Veriswap is only $1. There's a referral link in the video description below for your convenience. I want to shout out Leighton, Sheldon, and Just Collect. He'll be joining us shortly for the Vintage Spotlight segment. And I want to thank Nick and Larry from the Sports Card Madness podcast for having me on their pod, which drops in the next week or so. A little bit of hockey talk there. Also, Tag Grading's Discord server is hopping, and I promise you it actually it's hopping, as is the Facebook group. Join other hobbyists who value consistent, reproducible, accurate, and unbiased grading, who are chatting, buying and selling, and networking. Go to taggrading.com, the community tab, to join either the Discord or the Facebook groups. You'll find out first about tag grading drops, surprise flash drops, and everything else about tag as far as news goes. I want to thank all partners and sponsors for your continued support, and all of you loyal viewers and listeners. 200 episodes in on this show. Among the other shows that we do, I think we're close to 500 total, but 200 for Sports Cards Live. Pretty crazy. Happy to be here. Thank you all for being on this journey with me. And as always tonight, your comments and your questions are in play, so let's get to it. Tonight's guest started in the hobby in his early teens, back in the early 80s, collecting 70s top baseball cards and chasing Robin Yount, George Brett, Paul Molitor, Ricky Henderson. Oh, the nostalgia. In 1989, he got his first job as a PCGS coin encapsulator and sealer. And in 1991, he moved over to PSA as its first full-time employee and subsequently became the director of grading. His favorite teams are the San Francisco Giants and 49ers, the Golden State Warriors, and the San Jose Sharks. And his favorite athletes of all time are Lou Gehrig and Cal Ripken Jr. He's originally from Los Alamitos, California, currently hailing from Lake Oswego, Oregon. Let's bring him out, Mike Baker. Welcome to Sports Cards Live, pal. How are you?
Doing great. Thanks for having me, Jeremy.
You are welcome. It's good to have you, Mike. I guess, we met for the first time in person at the National just back in July of this year. How was the National for you? Did you have a good time? And how happy were you to meet me?
Very happy to meet you. I've been watching your platform for a long time. I'm happy to be here for the 200th episode. The National was great for NBA. We had a huge corporate booth. It was really done up. We just celebrated our 3-year anniversary in August. So we were, happy to see where we started, where we become, and, onward and upward.
Right on. This being the 200th episode of Sports Cards Live, which is, I haven't been very vocal about that, but I wanted to see what was the, anniversaries, birthdays, they have gemstones or precious metal, whatever. What is associated with 200? And so I Googled it, and diamonds are one of the things that came up. I thought MBA, you talk about MBA Diamond. That's right under Mike's name. Everybody, you can see the website, mbadiamond.com. I thought, well, that's a kind of a perfect match for episode 200. I threw a couple diamonds up on the YouTube thumbnail. So I'm glad to have you here tonight, Mike. I mean, your name is synonymous with eye appeal and high quality cards. So it's, I like eye appeal and high quality cards. So I'm happy to have you here. Let's hear a bit about your hobby history and kind of what took you, I guess, what positioned you to become PSA's first full-time employee and eventually the director of grading. Like, what was your journey up until then as far as the hobby goes, considering you started chasing those 70s Topps cards?
Well, like most teenagers in the early 80s, I was, well, not most teenagers, but I was into baseball cards in particular, and had a real fond of, tie to the mid 70s, early 70s type stuff with, Ryan and Molitor and Brett, et cetera, Henderson, and got into my kind of mid-teens, and sports and girls was probably, so I kind of drifted from the passion of collecting at that time, and then got back into it in 1989 when I was hired as a coin encapsulator from PCGS. So, and then from there, I was there just by happen chance. 2 years later, PSA started, and then I rekindled my passion for cards, and I immediately wanted to be a part of that. And so basically by proximity, I was fortunate enough to, be in that position to say, I want it. And they, at that time, privately held company, the culture was super vibrant, and got the opportunity to, start it and be a part of what was going to be happening over the, course of 3 decades, basically. So
if I were to kind of ask, like, what was your resume that qualified you to be the first professional grader in sports cards? Like, to me, that's a big deal. Like, to me, you're a pioneer in the industry, not sports cards as a whole, but as far as grading within our industry goes. So what did you have a keen eye for it? How did you kind of go from being a collector to a grader, and what did your superiors at PSA kind of expect from you as far as, your ability to assess a card?
Well, at that time in 1989, when I got back into coins, there were coin and card shows. So I would go to the Long Beach Coin Expo, and I saw what was happening, and I immediately got back into rekindling my passion then. And so I was, buying and selling and trying to figure it out, where the industry was going. And even at that time, 86 Donruss was big with Conseco and track and cards like that. So that was, you could buy a card out of a box and, walk to the next table and sell it for a profit. So I'm like, wow, this is awesome. And from there in 1981, when PSA started, I started as a card encapsulator, kind of a jack of all trades, shipping, customer service, encapsulation. And at that time, it was so, uncharted territory that there wasn't really like, here's your qualification. You had to, you had to do this or you had to do that. So over time, they created a grading test, the contractors or dealers that they had at the time that kind of helped, formulate what was going to go down. And I was a part of that formulation in the early 90s. And so from there, it was, hey, Mike, you're here, let's, take the test that they had provided. I took the test, I passed it, and that kind of cleared the way for me to, ascend.
I'm curious, like, we talk about grading standards, and all the grading companies have their standards published on their websites. How were those originally drawn up? Were you a part of that as well? Did you do it with your team? Like, where did our hobby's original grading standards come from?
I mean, originally you could probably go back to SCD and the old Beckett guides, honestly, because back then it wasn't defined like it is today. So it was like, X-mint, near mint, mint. And then with grading, when it came on, they defined it more clearly, more defined. So it was near mint plus, X-mint plus, and it really got it narrowed. And so at the onset of PSA, they had a consortium of dealers that helped put it all together. And then as it evolved, I was a part of the evolution of tightening it up. Hey, that doesn't work. This works. Centering in the back should be this, or front centering should be that. So I was a part of that.
How many graders would you say were on staff? Like, you ascended to being the director of grading. Tells me that there was probably a staff. You couldn't have done this all by yourself. Tell us a bit about the evolution of the grading department, the sports card, or I guess I can't just say the grading department at PSA. I guess the grading team at PSA.
Right. Well, at that time, it was myself and a guy named Adam Rothens. And it was just us. I mean, at that time, there was a lot of people, the community wasn't happy about grading coming on board. It was change. So there wasn't, the volume that PSA gets today is way different than the volume that we had then. I mean, it was hundreds of cards a month as opposed to hundreds of thousands of cards a month. And so at that time, there wasn't really a staff. As it grew, there was a staff. And fortunately, a lot of the guys that I helped hire and train are still there to this day. And so I'm really proud that those guys have, kept the tradition and legacy, and they're keeping the ship steered in the best possible direction that they can do. So I feel good about that. So
at the beginning, as you just said, it was kind of based on the Beckett magazines and SCD and that. How did you guys approach things like being consistent and also adhering to the standards, as an observer in the hobby and a 40 plus year collector, and also just somebody who takes in some hobby content and listens to the narratives? There are sort of thoughts out there that the adherence to the standards sort of changes, because we've seen back in the day, it seemed like your team, whoever over the years might have graded easier back then, harder now. And some people think the standards have changed, or I believe the adherence to the standards have changed, but I don't know that the standards have changed. I could be right, completely wrong on that. So please feel free to set me straight and just speak to that a little bit.
Well, back then too, there was no half grades. So for the first, say 13, 14 years, or actually longer, there was no half grades. So it was either a 6, a 7, an 8, or a 9, or a 10. So, back then it was either, like this is a really high end 7 or a weak 8. If it had awesome eye appeal or better centering, maybe what could have been termed as a 7.5 was an 8, because there was no way to go. It was just, at that time, it was deemed where that card had higher attributes. And at that time, with the grading standards that we had then, it became an 8, So, and I think that when people look back on where the grades were then, or what the grading center was, it's just different now. That's basically apples to oranges, as opposed to what we're dealing with right now, because the line has changed relative to adding half grades. If we had half grades at that time, it would have been, I think everybody today could probably go, oh, it wasn't as loose or hard or whatever. There'd be more clarification on it,
Yeah, the half grade does throw a little bit of a kink into the question, I suppose, as far as, because that adding a half grade, I don't know that changes the grading standards. It might add levels, but the standards are still going to be the same. Were you there when the half grade? I remember when the half grade was added. Now there was a rush to get that half grade bump if you could. Right. Were you there for that?
I was not. No, I left in late 2001. And I think the change happened in 03, 04, if I had memory serves me correct, right around then. So, I mean, it definitely changed again, because obviously if you're a collector or a dealer and, your card was a really high end 8, but it was never going to get a 9, having an 8.5 was, a huge benefit.
So you grade a card back then. How many people would grade the card? How many people would look at it at the beginning of time?
We had 2 graders look at the card, and then it would go to a verifier. So once it was encapsulated, there'd be a kind of a final grader to ensure that everything's, went through the grading or the sealing process. It comes back to the final verifier. That verifier signs off on the final grade, basically. Right.
And so how tough was it for your team back then to be consistent?
Well, I guess from a grading point of view, we always try to be consistent. There's no grader that wants to be inconsistent, because then it, you get a card that, came in and graded an 8, and then another card that looks exactly like it doesn't grade an 8. But within that, the communication of why it didn't grade an 8 is, I think, a bigger thing. I've listened to your platforms and others, and you get a card back and it's an 8 or a 9 and no one understands why. You just get, you get your card in a plastic holder and it's, it's an 8. There's no like, oh, well, it has, a slight corner hit or, a scratch or something that doesn't elevate to the higher grade. And, and we always talk about, or I listen to a lot of the customer concerns, collectors and dealers alike, about, why isn't my card this, and, getting an opportunity to see it after, and you are talking to that client, you can illustrate and give them, the information. And once they get it, they walk away going, maybe I don't agree with you, but I see it. So, I think that in the consistency, it's subjective. And at the end of the day, it's an opinion. But I guarantee you that every grader that's worth his salt is trying to do the best he can with the standards that are there. And you try to be consistent to that standard.
So, and I'm not going to try to get you to talk about what's going on at PSA now, because you've been gone for over 20 years. So yep. I don't want to do that to you, and I don't want to do that to them. I don't think that would be really fair. But I just want to gain insight into what it was like back then. I mean, I remember when grading first became a thing. So let me ask you this. What was it like going to card shows with those first PSA slabs and showing them to people and trying to gain traction for a grading as a service in the marketplace? It
was challenging. I mean, the majority of the dealers, since the onset of the collectible community, there was no grading. It was the dealer eye, the dealer experience, and the dealer trust that they had with their client, saying that this card was this or that card was that. And so when the grading came in, it was like, oh, I'll buy that card if PSA or a grading service signed off on it, meaning that I agree with what the dealer is selling me as a near mint to mint card, and then it becomes in plastic and it's an 8, because that's how it evolved. But going to the shows in the early days, it was hard because you had to show the difference of why the card made more sense value-wise to be in plastic as opposed to being in a screw down. Why should I spend money with a grading service when I don't need to? And so there was a lot of friction for that for a long time. I mean, the ads in SCD were, they had a Ghostbuster ad, in the bottom left of a lot of dealer, advertisements that said, say no to grading. And that lasted for years in the mid 90s and whatnot. So it wasn't an easy road for sure.
What about the internet though? Because in the early 90s, we didn't have the internet. The internet didn't come around until like the mid 90s, basically. So did the rise of the internet, because when people talk about why do we even need grading, my answer is always, well, it really arose when we had people purchasing cards sight unseen remotely. So having a third party opinion versus the dealer, who's an eBay seller, let's say, tell you what the condition was, and you receive the card and you have no recourse really, because it's the early days of eBay. How big was the internet and eBay eventually for PSA and grading overall?
Game changer. I mean, it changed the whole. I mean, in the early to mid 90s, you had SCD and you had your advertisements in Beckett. You had basically two platforms to, get your information about what you had to sell and or find out information to buy. So the reality, when eBay came on board, it was like, wow, now you're communicating with collectors and dealers across the world. And, now the information's flowing, the recognition of why getting a card encapsulated made so much more sense, because it was a safer bet. It's an insurance that, what you're being sold is what it is, signed off by a third party. And that was huge.
Definitely. And I believe that's the main benefit of grading things change. I mean, but to me, that was what gave grading its first real steps and push it into being, almost the center of the industry now. Okay, let's go to some comments here. There's questions coming through. So let's see. We got Mike V. Congratulations on 200 episodes. Thank you so much, Mike. Thank you, Jacob Dahl. You've been here for probably most of them. Sylvan, what a milestone. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that, Mike. Thank you, Frank Estella, Michael Stone, Jeff McMahon. Welcome, everybody, to the show tonight. Bobby Baseball, thank you. Tim Marin, love the content and dedication. Thank you, Tim. I appreciate that. Mark, thank you. Triple V, thank you. 130 point in the house. What's going on? The perfect choice for a guest to celebrate. Yeah, pretty happy to have Mike Baker here with us tonight. Good evening to the professor. He says, looking forward to the discussion with the first human grader and possible future discussion with ChatGPT about the first non-human machine grader. Mark Santucci, welcome to the show. Lapper, good evening to you. Jeff Hart, good evening. Mark Santucci always wants to know, do you collect 70s hockey, Mike?
I don't. Although that if I had an opportunity to go after a Gretzky, I would.
Yeah. Chris C says, grading, you surely don't mean pop report manipulation. Why don't we just stop on that for 1 sec, Mike?
Sure.
What are your thoughts when you hear people talk about population manipulation?
I mean, it would, if a grader looks at a card and he can't articulate why, the card should be this or should be that, then maybe that falls into that. But I really believe that every grader is looking to grade the card accurately and try to keep the consistency that you were talking about going. So I think there'd be a lot of hanky panky going on out there, way more than what's out there if that was the case. That's my opinion. I think that when you get a card, you look at it, you make sure it's authentic. You look for it for alterations, and then you grade it according to the standard that it is. And if a card has a corner hit on it, it's not going to be a 9 or a 10. So even sometimes cards are tough. Sometimes, especially the newer cards, centering and scratches and things like that prevent it from going. So and I think that goes back to what I was saying earlier about being able to communicate with the submitter or client, dealer, collector, and just telling him or showing him why it didn't go. And I think that would alleviate a lot of that perception of population control if those opportunities avail themselves.
So here's a tough question. Do you think there's ever been any hanky-panky in the grading rooms at the preeminent grading companies?
I can't speak to, is it possible? Sure. Opinion wise, I'd like to believe that, we're all professionals on the grading side of things. And that basically would ruin your reputation, your service. I just don't see that. If it did happen, I'm sure it would get caught and then it would be rectified and then would just move on. It wouldn't be something that's an ongoing type of thing, because then your company's name is going to go south.
Yeah, fair. Chris C says, once PSA charged me for a card they didn't grade, I stopped grading. I'll consider using SGC or maybe tag based on cost and service. Terry Fortune wants to know, did Mike grade the Honus Wagner?
I did not.
You didn't?
No, I encapsulated it though. And I remember that day, Bruce McNall and his team, or not his team, but there was like 14 or 15 people watching that card get encapsulated. So of all the cards that I've ever encapsulated at that time when I was, encapsulating, I had to be game on. I was on point, to make sure that card went perfectly in the plastic holder. And, I had a lot of people over my head watching that encapsulation go down. So there was no damage at that time.
So maybe I was wrong in both the description of this video and my intro that you were the hobby's first professional grader. So you weren't then, if somebody else graded the Wagner.
That was the very first card. It wasn't the first card that got graded. It was the first card that had some major notoriety, or, it was the epicenter of getting or helping PSA get on the map at that time. I had nothing to do with that card relative to the grading, but definitely the encapsulation. What I was saying with the description, the first full-time employee, the first full-time grader. So those are contractors, the guys that helped, as I said earlier, the consortium of guys that got together to help build the standard, et cetera. So was
the Wagner, I mean, it holds the serial number, 0001. Right. Was it in fact the first card encapsulated by PSA?
No.
So they reserved that serial number for a big card.
Correct.
Got it. Okay. Jeff Hart says, Mike, what impact did you observe the set registry made for PSA when it started?
The set registry at that time, the set registry was like, hey, what's this all about? You know, and the CEO of the call at the time, David Hall, he always said that if we could make the collectability of commons and get people to chase something other than rookies, other than stars, and you could get, you know, commons become of value and of need, that the set registry is going to help push collectors, push dealers to then collect or put together sets. And then having the competitive nature with a GPA system, you know, with higher, like I have the highest grade point average for that set, it really set it off. And at the early days, I was like kind of skeptical, you know, but today it's really paid dividends for everybody, you know. So it's been kind of fun to watch it evolve that way.
Certainly has been. Chris E says they need grader notes mandatory at all companies. You've kind of alluded to a bit of that. You've put it tonight as, you know, if they can articulate why a card grades the way it does, then they should be comfortable with the grade. Is, I think, you know, to paraphrase what you were saying before, would you, if you were to start a grading company, you kind of have, but if you were to start, you know, a full-blown grading company, would you issue grader notes or grading reports? The way, you know, at Tag Grading, Tag offers a completely detailed grading report,
right.
But I don't know anyone else that really does. You have heat maps with at the MBA side of things with your PWCC partnership, but what would you do today?
Well, with the heat mapping, I think is huge. Grader notes or a heat map is basically the same thing. It's basically highlighting the areas that are being seen by the grader to illustrate what we're seeing. And so I think that is huge. That's a big get. You can, you know, grader notes, it's just another expense. You know, when grading services have the multitude of volume that they have with the cards, it's just, you know, make sure it's real, it's not altered, and then put it in a holder, slap a grade on it, and get it out. That's just going to slow it down. I think, you know, with us at NBA, with the service that we provide for our raw card service, heat mapping, it does slow it down. But at the end of the day, it'll show you, it narrows the communication line. Like it'll give you that extra little pop. And then from there, if I see you at a show and you want to take it further, then I can, I saw this on the heat map. It showed upper right. I couldn't really see it. What do you actually see? Throw it under the light. I point it out and it's like, oh, there it is. So it, you know, that really helps. And, you know, then the guy could walk away going, I get it. Or he goes, well, I don't agree. But at least there was a conversation to, you know, talk about what the issues, in my opinion, were there. And that helps.
Deep Value Investor says, I think grading companies like the subjectivity of it all because it keeps people cracking and resubbing around and around, driving revenue for grading companies. You're responding. I can see. Why don't you?
I mean, yeah. I mean, the reality is that, you know, you try to be as consistent as possible, but, you know, a card can get cracked out and it can be resubmitted, and the grade hopefully comes back the same that you or the team did prior. Maybe it changes, maybe it goes down, maybe it goes up, maybe someone saw something that wasn't seen the first time through, you know. So, but I don't think there's like a conspiracy to make it where, you know, the grading services are forcing people to crack cards out, and with the values of the cards that they're at right now, that's a big gamble. You know, I mean, I would, me personally, if I had a card that I didn't agree with on the collector end or even a dealer, I'd at least want to get some communication about what did you see when I really believe in this card, and then have that conversation from there. Take the gamble if it's warranted. If not, then you're satisfied with the communication that I was able to provide.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because there's people that have made businesses out of, you know, buying what they feel are cards that are could be graded higher, and they do grade higher. And I mean, just from a time, you're going to get a different grade the second time than the first time. But that's part of the game, I suppose. And it's subjectivity. It's human. It's an opinion. And, you know, different people, different days, and all those sorts of things. Nothing really too new there, I don't think. Okay.
I agree. Not to overtalk, but the one thing that we do at NBA is when we go to shows and people have a question, I'm there. My business partner, Damien, is there. So we're there to talk and, you know, articulate where we're coming from And, that's been our mantra. I think communication about what's what, who's who is important. And people can walk away with a smile or kind of, gosh, man, I wish it was a great hire, but I didn't see it, or, whatever it may be. So
that's the hobby we are in right now. All right. Leighton Sheldon has joined us in the green room. I see you there, buddy. You ready to come up? He's nodding. We're going to bring up Leighton Sheldon for the vintage spotlight. And as always, I've asked you, Mike, to come with a question for Leighton. I've asked Leighton to come with a question for Mike. So without further ado, Leighton Sheldon, welcome back, bud. How have you been?
Good, thanks. What's up, Jeremy? How are you, Mike?
Doing great, Leighton. Good to see you, my man.
Yeah, great to see you as well.
Good to see you. So why don't we start with, Mike? Why don't you pose your question for Leighton that you came equipped with?
So Leighton, I was thinking about the question when Jeremy was doing the pre-op with me. My question to you is, where do you see, relative to the breaking network with Whatnot and TikTok and eBay Live and Fanatics, are guys going to get paid like exclusives to like stay within one platform? Or do you still have the flexibility to, with your platform to go where you choose? Or how do you think that's going to evolve?
Well, it's a great question, and I think it's fluid. So I think that today, without naming any particular breakers or where info came from, I know for a fact that some breakers are exclusive to, let's say, one platform. For us, me here at Vintage Breaks, we are not. But listen, the folks who are running these platforms like Fanatics Live, Whatnot, eBay Live, these are very astute business people. So whether it is today, Mike, I don't know that it'll be the same in 3 months, 3 years, so on and so forth. Great question. I really wish I knew the answer because then I would tell my team. But the reality of it is, like I said, I think it's very fluid, and the reason being is just the landscape is still being shaped. So the time will tell.
Fair enough.
Thanks, Leighton. And everybody, Leighton from Just Collect and Vintage Breaks. You can follow him on Instagram. Check the ticker right now. Listen to his podcast, Trading Card Therapy, as well. Leighton, what question did you bring for Mike Baker?
Well, I have, a couple of questions. One of these is kind of old school, and, we'll kind of see what Mike says about this. So, back in the day, and even literally as of like this past weekend, I'm listening to content about, these, I guess all these different theories about population control. And so seeing as how you were on the ground floor, at PSA, and of course for a while at GAI, although I don't know if the pop report was really in play there. When you were at PSA, do you recall or ever remember there being, a formal meeting and, hey, boys, the 93 SP Jeters is too tough. We shouldn't give out any more 10s. Or, the 52 Mantle, is now heating up. Should we not give out as many 8s or whatever the case is? And I caught some of your conversation with Jeremy before I came on. And so I kind of feel it might be in a similar vein as far as like conspiracy theory and all that kind of stuff. But I did want to hear from you what your take was on it.
I will say, relative to like a SP Jeter or a 52, if there was ever a conversation, it was to ensure that high value cards were looked at. Hey guys, if this thing's a shot 10 or a shot 9 or whatever it may be, make sure this isn't a fly by the night thing. And you're not thinking about lunch or what you're doing after work, and that you were really giving it the extra pop, the extra look. And so a little bit more time on it to ensure that you weren't making a mistake. And so, that's what I would consider, an answer to that question. I wouldn't definitely not say it's pop control. I would say it's just a harder look,
Makes sense.
Yeah.
All right. Good stuff. Leighton, where are you? What's going on with you right now? Where are you at?
Well, I'm actually at home here in Hoboken. But I did have another question, more really for both of you guys, but also the audience. And I figured, Mike, with NBA doing what you guys do over there, I have a feeling I think I know how you answer it, but I was curious what everyone else thinks as well. And so, I've long thought this, and I'm not a professional grader. I just, grade my cards like a lot of other dealers and collectors do. But I do feel like we've reached a point where, we don't know if and when AI will ever hit grading and help grading. So putting that aside for a moment, at what point and at what dollar level do we believe that auction houses, eBay sellers such as myself who might sell in person at a convention, do we think that we should be providing a report to someone a little bit more than you're just simply giving someone a $20,000 card and a plastic case? When do you think, at what dollar level, and do you think this will ever happen where it's going to be kind of like required in our industry that a certain dollar level and above card that's graded will come with some sort of report?
Well, currently with NBA, with our raw service, and even with our NBA Diamond service, we provide that report. So we're doing that. I think, you know, the heat map, we threw some dollar level amount of money into, you know, creating that technology so that customers and dealers alike can see what we're seeing on our end to illustrate the areas of concern, a scratch, a thumbprint, a wrinkle, a crease, whatever it may be. On the Diamond level, our Diamond service that we provide, it gets a little report card. You know, it's already coming in plastic from one of the PSA, SGC, BGS, or CGC. And we have a little report card that goes in the back, and say it's a PSA 10 SP Jeter. And, you know, it didn't make the muster for a sticker. And on the report card, it'll show, you know, a scratch, a little edge wear, whatever it may be. So there is some, you know, some mechanism for the client that submitted the card to then find out what we saw to alleviate just getting a card back and not having any information about why it didn't get a sticker and or, you know, what are the issues on the NBA raw service line. So
it's a great service, Mike. I'm curious, as someone who bids actively at auctions and is bidding in Heritage tonight and last night, can a collector, dealer, investor, can we utilize your services virtually and email you or text you a scan of a card in an auction, or are you not there yet?
Actually, it's a great question. We've been having this kind of an ongoing conversation within NBA for the Diamond service line to create a scan mechanism where you can scan the front and back of the card so that we can take a look at it, kind of like a quick review that there is for autographs. We're talking about doing something similar with that so that at the bare minimum, we can tell you relative to centering and try to give you a quick opinion of like kind of a likely candidate, kind of a likely no, and then try to, you know, the cards have so much value now that shipping them with insurance and all that stuff is a big, you know, barrier to coming to us. At shows, it's not, because you submit it, you get it back the same day or the next day, it's all good. But sending a card from Hoboken to Tigard, Oregon, where our offices are located, and it's a $100,000 card, you're going to think twice. But if there's a mechanism to say, hey, you know, for $5 or $10, whatever it may be, is this a likely candidate? And that's what we're discussing right now. So I wouldn't be surprised in the not too distant future if that technology became, you know, introduced and available for clients to use.
The hobby would be grateful for that. Please do that.
Perfect.
I can see it working for centering, but that's about it. At the resolution that we're getting, that you can get on a phone image, for example, you need, you know, PWCC has really great high res images. When I'm doing my PWCC shows, I can zoom right in and see the corners and the edges really close. Surface still is really tough to tell in 2 dimensions. So right. I like it I like that you said there, Mike, you said centering, because if you had said much more, I would have thought, well, I don't know. I think it's good for centering. Does that resonate?
100%. The centering for the NBA Diamond service is huge, both for the front and the back. So just that, we get so many cards that get submitted at shows where the centering is the issue. So from that perspective, I think that the quick review, whatever we describe it as, will help. And so, you know, I'd much rather have Leighton not send a vintage card to us or whatever it may be, if it's just a centering issue and we can kind of just kill it right there, you know, and for a nominal fee to find that out, everybody's happy.
My answer, Leighton, you know, obviously I'm affiliated with Tag Grading, and with every card that Tag grades, you get a full detailed grading report. It's you know, I understand that NBA's heat map is somewhat of a report, but it's night and day compared to what Tag offers. Mike, you've seen a Tag grading report, I assume?
Yes.
Yeah. So
no, it's got a lot of information. I think for what Tag is doing, it's doing it right for the cards that they grade, you know, for what they're providing. 100%.
Yeah. But so I think, but Leighton, your question on like what dollar value should we expect it? Should we expect to know? I think to me, it should somewhat be aligned with the amount that you're paying, Now I can speak, tag is automated. It's automated grading. It's not AI grading. It's automated grading. So creating that report doesn't add a ton of more time, let's say. But for a human grading company, I think if people want the additional information, you might have to pay a different service level versus their cheapest economy level pricing. That said, I want all the information I can get. I would like graders notes with every single submission. And but that's just me. That's one of the reasons I fell in love with Tag and became affiliated was because I like that level of detail. I like to know what I'm getting. When I buy a house, although it's a lot more money than a $40 card, you have an inspection done. You want to make sure you know what you're getting. You buy a car, you want to know what you're getting. You buy an investment. There are all sorts of reports that need to be filed and financial statements and auditors reports and all these different MD&As and all these things you need to have in order to be able to sell. The hobby is one area where you don't need to tell your clients anything about what you're doing for them. You just give them the card back in the plastic and or maybe not in the plastic and just say thank you very much. Hope to see you again. But my thought. But to give you a better answer, Leighton, I would think that anything over $1,000 in value, I'd be willing to pay a bit extra to get a grading report if I were still willing to use human grading companies, which I'm just not for certain cards, for most cards anymore. But that's just me. Good.
All right. I think it's great feedback. I really just like in general the discussion that we're having. I mean, really think about how far, Mike, I've known you a long time, man. The hobby has gone through a lot like every other industry. And I'm excited about your company, Mike. And I was going to kind of close with similar to Mascot, which now my company, Just Collect, is actively using, mainly because I ran into Ezra on Jeremy's podcast. I'm not going to take up any more time today, Mike, but I'd love to connect offline because, we are buying, let's say, a lot of cards here and, I'm bidding in auctions and I'm just thinking like, wow, not just when I'm buying, but if I'm selling a 53 Topps Jackie, which is a very popular card now, a 5 or a 6 didn't used to be a huge grade on that card. Well, now that's several $1,000s. People are more concerned with not just the centering, the surface, so on and so forth. And so, Mike, I have been paying attention to some of the differences when cards are tagged with, your certification. And I just think the money aside, right, if you provided your service for free, which I realize you can't, I think it's wonderful for the industry as it stands. And as you said, Jeremy, whether it's $1,000 level or if it's $10,000, I just think that the more informed that the consumer, customer, investor, whatever the case is, that's buying the card, they're going to feel better. They're going to feel like they can go back in and they're not going to only buy a diamond once in their life or a Gretzky rookie or a Mantle rookie once in their life. They're going to have that much more confidence to make bigger and more intelligent purchases. And I just think that's going to be better for all of us moving forward.
Yeah, I agree with that personally, Leighton. I think eventually the big money spenders are going to get a little queasy with spending big money on cards where they have no idea why they got the grade they did. I think
Mike already knows they do that. I mean, I have people, I don't work for Heritage. In the last 48 hours, I've had several texts come to me. Leighton, what do you think of this card? No one pays me for my opinion, right? They truly just want to know. Mike's grinning, but he knows this is the case. And so as much as I love to help, and I know you two love to help, it really would be better to have something that's a little bit more institutional that we all can rely on, not just here in this group, but outside money that's coming in. You don't want to be embarrassed and someone buys a $50,000, $10,000, $100,000 plus card. And they're like, oh my goodness, there's a tear on the back. Yeah. Wish we would have caught that,
Yeah. Well, thanks, Leighton. The Vintage Spotlight with Leighton and Sheldon, every episode of Sports Cards Live. Everybody, you can follow him at Leighton_Sheldon and just_collect on Instagram. And of course, his podcast, Trading Card Therapy. Thanks, Leighton. Good to see you as always.
Good to see you guys.
Thanks, Leighton.
Take care, pal.
Bye.
All right. So we've got lots of questions and comments coming through, Mike. So Let's we are also, just so everybody knows, we are going to bring on eventually Mike's partner at NBA Diamond, Damien, who is the CEO of the company. You're the director of grading. We're going to bring Damien on soon, but let's get to some more questions and comments, and then I have an area I want to speak to you about, Mike. But let's go to Mookie Chilson. Says, how did you guys view your competitors back in the day? I wonder what you all thought when Beckett created BVG for vintage. SGC came along, KSA in Canada, GAI. What was the overall landscape like early on from the PSA grading perspective?
Well, at that time, I was a lot younger and I wanted it to just be PSA. So we were very competitive. We wanted to be the only service in town, the only service that, dealers and collectors viewed as the foundation of grading, basically. And, with, as I got older and, competition breeds new innovation. It provides a collector dealer choice. It brings down prices. So it's a good thing. So I'm happy that grading services out there that are doing it the right way, or trying to do it the right way. And I think it's good, provided obviously everyone's trying to do it the right way. There's packaging services out there that are so-called grading services, which, that's up to the collector or dealer to decide what they want to do with their product. But from a grading point of view, from a true grading point of view, I believe, the guys that are doing it right, or the more established grading services are the ones that, I would lean on as if I was on that side of the table.
Yeah. I've for 3.5 years now doing this show, I've always said that if I'm going to submit cards to a grading company, I want to know who the graders are, a little bit about them, and not that it's just, what I refer to as a basement grading company sort of thing, which we've seen several of. And then somebody might say, well, what about how are you involved with tag grading? Well, I happen to know that tag gradings, our head of grading was somebody that you hired over at PSA early on. Just to put that out there, I think it's important because, when CSG started up their sports division, they hired 2 of the lead graders from Beckett grading. And I thought that was, it wasn't great for Beckett grading, but I thought it was a really smart move for them. And I thought, well, these guys know what they're doing. They know, they've got experience in grading. So that's a good thing versus, I forget how you just worded it, kind of the packaging companies that come up. And yeah, I would personally, I don't want to use them. I want to know kind of what I'm getting. Okay. The professor wants to know, considering PSA had a verifier, how hard is it to judge the grade of a card that's already in a slab?
Well, the card at that time was already graded by 2 raw graders. So really, it's just making sure that through the process that everything's, where it should be, making kind of the final verifier check to make sure that no one missed anything. If 2 guys missed it and the final verifier catches it in plastic, then it's a conversation. Maybe it gets cracked out, something happens, whatever that does happen or did happen. So, but you can see things. Just because the card's entombed in plastic doesn't mean that you, especially in the proper setting, which every grading service isn't grading, outside, with weather and whatnot. So basically they're looking at the card as is after it's already been predetermined by 2 previous graders, where it sits. So it's basically a quality control check and ensure that nothing is going out that would be termed, something that shouldn't be out there. And that's where it's at.
Got it. Okay, good. Jeff Hart says, over the years, were there any time frames where you saw or caught more alterations than normal?
I think when, after like you talked about earlier when eBay came onto the scene and grading became more of a standard relative to, there was more value if you got your card graded. I think we saw a larger percentage of cards that were coming in that, were in plastic screw downs at that time, kind of sold the way it used to be sold prior to grading coming on. So we would see cards would come in, at a higher frequency at that point, for sure.
Okay, here's a funny comment from Vendaloria Warlock. Says, so this is the guy we can all thank for making the hobby worse, not better. Thank you for introducing grading as a way to scam people. that it's literally comedy, a comment like that. Whereas Deep Value Investor says, I disagree. I love grading in general and think it has contributed to the huge growth in the hobby. What do you think, Mike? Do you think that, as Vendoralia here says, that it ruined the hobby? I mean, listen, the hobby's only grown exponentially since then. So I don't think it's, well, maybe it depends what you're measuring growth by, but the hobby has gotten to where it is today, seems to be pretty strong, and grading is a fundamental part of it. So your thoughts on his comment, and then when you consider a Deep Value's comment as well, that he thinks it's contributed to huge growth, which I agree with. What are your thoughts?
My thought is bad actors contributed to grading coming on board. So if people were deceiving collectors and, people were selling stuff that wasn't accurately, a near mint to mint card, if it wasn't an 8, it was really a 6, and they were making near mint to mint money, but then they were selling an X mint product, and that happened, and it quite frequently. And that's what was one of the things that brought on grading. There was a big slew of stuff that was going on back in the day, and grading tightened it up. It added an insurance to ensure that, hey, if this dealer is going to sell me this product at that price, is the condition from him going to match what an independent party is going to say? If people were playing above board, grading probably wouldn't be necessary, but it is.
Or if we weren't buying cards across the world or across the country, or, even the next state or province over, yeah, I think grading it's a necessity right now. Without it, the hobby wouldn't be nearly what it is today. And maybe that's what a lot of people want, is the hobby to go back to the way it was in the 80s, but you can't go back in time. Everything is evolving. The hobby's going to evolve too. If you don't like it, stay in your ways and buy raw cards.
It goes back to what you said earlier about buying a house, buying a car, whatever it may be. I mean, if you're going to buy a house or buy a car, you want those extra, inspection reports and everything else. You don't want to be stuck with a $1 million home that it all got rewired by some guy that was never an electrician. Those are good little tidbits to know. And I think, not to compare something like that with grading, but grading definitely adds an extra comfort level for people to transact.
Yeah, fair. Swamp Donkey Off Grid, welcome to the show. Good to see you. Vintage Card Collector says, I'd like to know how you assess surface condition when it's slabbed, especially BGS, since they are thicker and have the inner sleeve. I think this has to do really with the crossover service, and I don't know if when you were back at PSA, if you were getting cards from other grading companies in their slabs, and you'd have to decide, with the min grade, I only want you to convert this if it's going to come over as an 8. But considering your experience, can you still address what Vintage Card Collector is asking here?
At PSA, we definitely had crossovers at that time when I was there. And, if we could identify it, 100%. Obviously, we knew if we were going to crack it out, it was going into a PSA holder, or we had to buy the card back. So was there some conservative edge relative to looking at something and maybe there might be something there, maybe not, whatever, maybe that plays into send the card back and say, we're not sure, so to be honest, that's where that would be. I think sending a card in today with the values that they're at, the likelihood of a big value card being cracked out is small. It's not like it was, because the value inherently makes a greater tighten up. No one wants to be the guy that cracked out $100,000 card and all of a sudden, boom, there's, all this stuff on it. What we see on the NBA Diamond Review service for a card that wants to get, an eye appeal sticker or whatever, we do our best to identify anything that may be on there, and we look at it really well. And if we're not comfortable, we'll say it. But if we're comfortable, it's going to go. Yeah. And we see plenty of BGS product and other plastic holder product from the grading service that we, accept, and those holders give us no problem really. If you're in the right setting and you know how to evaluate a card, you can find it.
Okay, thanks for that. PSA 10 wants to know, do you remember what the first PSA 10 card was?
I don't. No, I wish, back in the day when we get, hundreds of cards in, I would have that data in my mind, but
it's been a while.
At the level, it's crazy.
Jake Dahl, I like this question. If a card grades an 8, but looks like a 9 or a 10, what would be exactly wrong with it? I think the question, what could we not see with our naked eye when you see a card that hey, this looks like there's nothing wrong with it. It got an 8. What might be wrong with it that caused it to lose, two grade levels?
I'll keep going back to the same thing, being in the right setting to evaluate the card. If you're looking at the card when you get it back from whatever grading service you're using and you're in your kitchen and you're trying to identify why my card got an 8 as opposed to a 9 or a 10, you're not going to find it. I will say that centering plays a part in that, frictional cornerware on a card, something that's not seen, that is seen in the proper setting.
Fair, yeah, great answer to that. Tiger Jordan, thank you so much on the 200 episode. Congratulations. Proud to have you as a loyal fan of supporter this whole time. Thanks so much, Tiger Jordan. Chris C says, thought the McNall Gretzky Honus Wagner card was trimmed. I heard that somewhere. Yeah, I mean, Bill Mastro has admitted that card was trimmed. What were your thoughts as the person who encapsulated? You didn't grade that card, but you're the person who encapsulated it.
Yeah.
What went through your mind when you found out that Bill Mastro admitted to trimming that card or cutting it from an uncut sheet, wherever, or panel, whatever it came from?
I was, obviously nobody wants to have, iconic cards like that are deemed altered or trimmed in a holder. So, I mean, it was just kind of a kick in the gut that, it became the kind of story or the hobby legend that it's become. It is what it is. But, that card still sells for a lot of money, as do other altered cards. Back in the day, altered cards, there was no value. Now, an altered card properly encapsulated and labeled altered still has value. So, and actually a lot of value. I mean, we just saw Mile High Auctions just sold the altered or restored Honus Wagner, and it sold for a little under $2 million. Yeah. So, I mean, it's a different world.
Let's segue right off of that comment right there. I alluded to it earlier that there was sort of a discussion I wanted to have with you, and it really comes. I want to get your opinion on, there has been more altered cards entering the market, more commentary on that. We've got services now that will clean up your card. So I made a list of things: cleaning, soaking, rolling out creases, and trimming. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on in general, how hard are these things to detect from a grading perspective? But also, our hobby is like I believe it's the only category in ephemera where these things are just outlawed. It's an unwritten rule that you can't do these things. Yet people are still doing them, of course, but in general, the hobby doesn't like these things, trimming especially. What are your thoughts on, again, detection, but also, are any of these things being normalized, and do you see a shift in future collector and investor acceptance of some of these modifications?
The short answer is yes, it's happening. I mean, the cleaning, there's cleaning services at shows now. So, I mean, that, 10 years ago, or even a couple years ago, that was kind of a taboo. So, to see those things, relevant and the services are being used is, it's changing, it's morphing, it's evolving. I agree with what you said relative to trimming. Yeah, the games are big. Just measuring the card, if collectors in particular just measured the card, right there, you can get a determination whether or not the grading services are going to, possibly call it minimum size and or not graded at all because it doesn't size. So right there is grab a ruler, guys, and try to find out the grading service that you're using. Find out the kind of rulers they're using so you can match. So you're not using a big yardstick, but the graders are using this other stick. You know what I mean? So, I mean, that's a big thing. Find out what the grading services that you're using, the tools they're using to evaluate your cards, and then try to mirror that. And then you can kind of get online with what they're looking at, the way you're looking at it, at least with measurement.
Tell me a bit about soaking, because I don't know much about this. I've never soaked a card, but someone in a chat I'm in posted a picture the other day of a card soaking. Mm-hmm. And some people were like, "Oh, how dare you?" And other people were like, "Oh, how does that work?" Right. So, there are people that are curious, and then there are people that are staunchly against it. But soaking a card in water, mm-hmm. like, to me, I would think that the fibers would maybe not break down, but separate or something. Like, What do you know about soaking a card? Is this something that is done a lot? Can you detect a card that's been soaked?
The short, yes and no. On certain card stock, you can feel a difference. It's almost like they used, using regular water or some type of hydrogen peroxide or something. It's going to leave kind of like a film or kind of a different feel with the card. That's why when you hear about why is that grader not wearing gloves, he should be wearing gloves to grade that card. But with gloves, you're not going to be able to feel the cardboard to decide or to determine whether or not there are other issues with the card. Sometimes just touching a card, I can determine whether or not it's fake, like immediately, just touching it, glossy, or, the type of, the good thing is that you can't replicate 1952 tops, paper, there's going to be a modern technology to try to replicate that, but soaking a card to then remove a stain or gum stains that doesn't leave those signatures, it's really hard to detect. So that's the honest truth. I mean, I'd be lying to tell you that every card that was soaked, I'd be able to pick it off. I couldn't say that.
Yeah. And rolling out creases, is this something that is done a lot? Like I've had cards in my showcase at card shows before. I remember specifically, this is actually probably before the pandemic now. Well, I know it was before the pandemic, and a dealer who I know came up to me, looked at one of I think it was my Maurice Richard 51 Parkhurst rookie. And he's like, you should, you can make that better. You can, it was a 4. He goes, yeah, I could probably turn that into a 5 for you. And I thought, really, like, you're just telling me this and admitting this. And like, he's like, oh yeah, people do it all the time. And I was, the naive me back then was like, really, like it's that common of a thing. And now I've smartened up and I recognize just how common it is. But I think it had to do with maybe rolling out a crease or flattening a corner, something like that. Like, how prevalent are these behaviors and actions in the hobby, and are they bad? One thing that I say, and I've said this before, and it's not like I really mean it, but if I have a card that is from the 1970s or whatever, a vintage card, and I drop it on the floor and ding a corner, well, I've altered that card, but it's okay. That alteration is okay. If I'm a kid and I'm 8 years old and I write on a card, I put my initials on it, I've altered the card. That's okay, because it's acceptable alteration. But if you try to reverse these things, all of a sudden the hobby looks at them as a very negative action or behavior. What are your thoughts on reversing? So not trimming where you're actually taking something away from the card as it came out of the pack, and not like recoloration where you're adding something that wasn't ever there or that wore off like that didn't, where it didn't come out of the pack. But what are your thoughts on rolling out creases that also weren't there when they came? So the first instance of alteration is dropping the card or creasing it. And then the second instance is reversing that. The first instance seems to be very innocent and acceptable, but the second instance is frowned upon. Your thoughts?
Well, think about a card that's within a pack, right? So the pack's going to have, it gets into a box, it gets into a case, and it gets traveled, and then it gets opened. And then I call it frictional packware, where the card within the recesses of the pack has a little corner tip that's up or whatever, maybe from the pack itself. So not even dropping it like you're saying. But if you think about how cards were stored and transacted prior to grading, they were in a four screw down plastic holder. So you had like, half-inch screws on each of the corners of the plastic holder. So you take that card straight from the pack, throw it in that holder, because that's how you went to shows. That's how you displayed your cards. And just with the pressure that you're, screwing the card or screwing the screw down on with the card inside, you're flattening those cards out. You're flattening that corner out. So there's no grader in the world that's going to be able to determine whether or not that card is, by definition, altered, because it literally just laid down, based on how cards were stored. So, I guess it really comes down to like, a card that's, when you say a rolled out crease, okay, a rolled out crease, most times, a high percentage of times, those cards can be picked off, and those cards will be either downgraded. Hey, we see it. It's still a 3. It's never going to look like the guy was looking, hopefully as a 7 or an 8. And so you call it a 3, or you call it altered. However you want to, whatever your grading services standards are, and what those graders are determining, what they're viewing at that time with what they're seeing, and then they make that determination.
All right. Well, appreciate it. It's an interesting line of discussion, and one that I think we're going to hear more and more about as time goes on all these things. Okay, let's keep on going to comments here. Dave O says, it's extraordinary how often I've sent in PSA 10s of modern cards to MBA to not get back an MBA sticker. Can I call it, do you call it an MBA sticker or an MBA diamond? What do you refer to your labels as?
We call it a diamond, a diamond hologram is what we call it. People call it stickers. It's still, like I said, we're 3 years old. So I'm sure the community will figure out what it's supposed to be, so we call it diamond.
I respect the branding of calling it diamonds. I think that's nice. He goes on to say, it tells me how stringent MBA diamonds are to get based on merit. Do you want to just comment on respond to that at all?
Well, so basically a PSA 10, or let's not just pick on PSA. Let's look at all the grading services that we accept for review. Centering, again, plays a big part. So if the card is 80-20, 90-10, 70-30 in some cases, it's just not going to go. And with the report card, we highlight why it didn't go because of centering on the back or on the front. If there's a corner wear, you remember PSA doesn't have a pristine. What they have is a gem mint. So, under the standard, it can have a small detractor on the card relative to being a scratch, a corner hit, whatever it may be. And if that's there, we'll call it and, put that on the report card and illustrate that to the client or the submitter of the card.
It's interesting, there are PSA 10s that used to be 9s, and there are 8s and there are 6s that are now 8s, and back and forth, right? So, and it brings into the discussion of comps and what a fair value is on a card, where there are cards in PSA 10 holders that are probably pristine. There are also cards in PSA holders that are probably like 8s and 9s or 8.5s and 9s to be a little bit more conservative there. But and that's where I think your services come in handy for people who aren't as savvy in terms of making that assessment for themselves and do value another third party opinion, I think. Okay.
Agreed. I will say that, one of the talking points that I use when I talk to clients at shows, PSA, because they don't have a true pristine, you look at a 9.0 to a 9.9, and through that range, that is the range that your commenter is talking about. And with what we're doing is we're highlighting the best of the best within the grade. We're not saying the card's not a 9 under the definition of whatever grading service that holder is or that card is in. We're saying that from an MBA point of view, under our standards, we're looking at the best of the best. We want the cards that have, under our definition with our standards, that have the requirement for the centering on the front and back, that the corners are all there. It has just like awesome eye appeal. And as we talked prior to the show a few days ago, eye appeal cards have always sold for more money. People that look at a 50-50 dead center card probably going to pay a little bit more than they would something that is 65-35. Both are 8s, but that 8 with the better centering, the better eye appeal, is going to trade at a little bit higher price. People are going to be willing to pay more for that. And what MBA services, what we're seeing for sure, is that those cards are being highlighted and people are going, yep, that's it. It got a diamond, and you can look at it and go, wow, this is the best of the best, for that grade.
Some people say, and I've just seen it, they say, well, I don't need somebody else to grade the grader. I can look at it myself. And then my often retort back is, if I'm engaging in the discussion, is, but not everybody has your eye. So yeah, you can do it. So you have no need for their services perhaps, but other people maybe do, maybe newer entrants or people, whomever, for whatever reason. Dude, what do you say to, I've seen some memes out there that take a slab and have like 12 stickers on there, yours, the PWCC eye appeal sticker, a few more. Just first of all, like, what do you think when you see those kind of memes? I'll just refer them as memes because that's what they are. What do you think when you see them? And, what do you say to somebody who pokes fun at the whole, why are you grading the grader? Like, you already had it graded once. Why do you need to grade it again? To me, it's obvious, but a lot of people just don't see it. I feel I do. I think a lot of people don't. how do you respond to people that kind of laugh at the whole grade the grader? I already had it graded.
Well, first off, it's change. And, no one likes change. And, my background, was say no to grading and detracting of what grading is or isn't. And so, we started our company in the height of COVID. We're, the only show you could go to is the Dallas show, shout out Dallas Card Show. But the reality is that, like you said, not everybody is going to go into the detail and the depths of wanting to create an eye. That takes the extra effort level. But investors and collectors who are just interested in buying signed off cards that are, legitimately centered front and back, that they've been highlighted with a sticker or a diamond, and they're not interested in going into the weeds about why and what. People buy labels, and that's a fact. And then others, like your commenter, why do I need this? You're grading the graders. We're really not grading the graders. We're looking at the card to highlight the best with what is in the grade, and that's it. So I think it's a value add, and the price comps on diamond stickered cards are definitely there. I couldn't just come out 3 years ago and say, hey, here's the future, but you needed price comps. You needed to get out there and shake hands and kiss babies and put your work in and gain the trust and respect of the community, and take it from there.
Yeah. It makes sense to me, and I was going to say I understand how it doesn't make sense to others, but I really don't. I think it just comes down to kind of opening your mind a little bit to understanding that there are people who, for whatever reason, maybe you don't see the purpose for yourself, but others do. Not everybody uses the same services in life or in many areas. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I will add that we had a lot of detractors when we started. We still do. But a lot of the detractors that we had when we started are now some of our biggest clients, because ultimately the dollar is going to, switch your mindset. And once people are happy and comfortable with the change, then it takes a life of its own. Yeah. So maybe the commenters that are on there, maybe they're not supporters today. Maybe they'll never will be. But when the dollar values change and they're sitting on a card, especially if they have a good eye and they don't have it diamond, they're going to want it diamond because someone else is going to grab that money.
All right. Daniel A., good evening to you. Welcome to the show. Bobby Baseball says, what were you all thinking when you decided to put baggies in the slabs?
Baggies in the slabs?
I think sleeves.
Oh, so what do you mean?
Some slabs, whether it's, I think so. I think, first of all, we know Beckett has an inner sleeve. The inner sleeve, PSA has it sometimes they don't. I can't figure out when they do and when they don't. Yep. But can you respond to putting a sleeve inside the slab?
The Mylar sleeve relative to PSA, because I was there when we did it. If the card was authentic and unaltered and it didn't fit the recesses of the holder, you would have to put it in a sleeve so it wouldn't dance around and cause damage within the holder. So it was a protective mechanism for the card. Yeah. I'm not speaking for why Beckett did it, but their cards in a Mylar sleeve adds an extra layer of protection within the holder so it doesn't dance around. You don't have to worry about the card hitting a rail or whatever the recesses of whatever grading service they're using. So I think it's more protection for the card.
Okay. Deep Value Investor says you can get a report from BGS. It's called subgrades, but I'm going to push back and say, no, that's not a report. That's more of like a headline, but you're missing all the information because you don't know what it's more of a headline. It's very general. It's not detailed really at all, but it's more than you get from companies that don't have subgrades. That's for certain. But I would liken it to a headline versus the report beneath it. Personally.
Absolutely. I will add that what the headline is stating, like say it's an 8 on surface, but you're not able to see the scratch or the divot or whatever it may be on the surface. It'd be nice to have that extra communication about what it is. And I agree with you. So
yeah. And that's one of the things I love about what tag grading is doing. Swamp Donkey Off Grid says, is charging more for an expensive card as opposed to something of lesser value? Does it constitute a conflict of interest? Your thoughts on, at PSA, you pay more for the more valuable card. And one thing that they don't do is refund you if that card goes down in value later, which is where I have a big issue with it. But I understand they also use it to fund their guarantee program. Your thoughts on charging more for a more expensive card? And do you at MBA charge have a tiered pricing system based on the value of the card?
We do. NBA does. Honestly, we want to get that card that's a higher value card. We want to get it looked at and then get back to the customer's hands. We don't want to sit on, hundreds of thousands of dollars at a show. We want to do our service, get it back to the client, and then give it the extra look based on the value of the card. We're taking more liability to look at, higher value cards as other grading services are, and every grading service charges more for value cards, basically.
Yeah. Okay. Do you think there's a conflict of interest there? Like, are the companies that do that? And I mean, I know PSA does. I'm not sure if any other company does that. But is there a motivation for that? And you know what? I don't want to ask you this because you're not there anymore, and you've talked about what you're doing. So I'm not going to put the question to you. But I understand that there is a perceived conflict of interest because they get more money the higher they grade. They can charge more for a card if they give it a higher grade. And I think there is a conflict of interest there, but you have to put your trust in the company that they're not going to do that. And that's up to every individual consumer or customer out there to assess.
I would leave that. Agreed. I would leave that to be my answer, actually. That's exactly it. You just said it.
Okay. Hobby Champ says, is an NBA silver sticker essentially just the third-party grade a card already is? I'm just trying to understand the purpose of the silver sticker. I guess I'm wondering if you ever don't give a sticker. Thank you.
Yes. Number one, we don't give a sticker. If the silver sticker recognizes its superior attributes at the level under our definition of what gets stickered and what doesn't, basically. It's a plus. It's like, wow, this card met the requirements, but it didn't quite get to a gold level. And, the black level really is, a 1% conversation. So the conversation really sits with silver and gold.
Okay. Mike Petty says, I'm curious how all the fake Mickey Mantle, Joe DiMaggio, Ted Williams, Sandy Koufax autographs got authenticated when you were with Global/GAI with your signed certificate. Mr. Baker, can you address that? Thank you.
Yeah, my name was on the COA as the director of authentication. I definitely can't even detect my own autograph. I've never been an autograph authenticator. It was just much like Joe Orlando wasn't an autograph authenticator at PSA, but his name was on PSA DNA items, as it was with, Richard McWilliams at Upper Deck, as it was with, Ted Taylor at Fleer. It was, just a title position. And believe me, if I could go back in time and not have my name on autograph stuff, even in an administrative role, I wouldn't have, because I know nothing about autograph authentication.
Thank you for answering the question. Mike Petty, thanks for the question is from you. Jeff Hart, was there ever a serious discussion at PSA behind the scenes about making a 9.5 grade? And if so, what were the pros and cons that were discussed? Like, did you talk about this at the beginning of time? Well, then again, there weren't half grades until 2003 or 4. So
yeah, there was no conversation about that. No, it was really just, it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way up to 10. Then there was no, no half grades. So there was no discussion at that time.
Yeah, so you really can't answer that because you weren't there when it happened. Yeah. Thank you, Leighton. Sheldon, for the congrats. Orlando, a collector's dream. Welcome to the show. Swamp Donkey says, grading is a positive in my eyes. Confidence is everything. It has made base cards valid again. Good comment. Hobby Champ says, since you don't have an affiliation with any particular third-party grading company, which of the top 4 third-party grading companies do you see the most overgraded cards from? I can't wait to see if and how you're going to answer this one.
Well, overgraded cards, I wouldn't say overgraded. I think overgraded is simplifying what we're looking at, because as your previous commenter said, he sends cards to NBA and he doesn't get a sticker. So I think it's just we have a more rigorous definition of what can get diamond, silver, gold, or black. And it's not taking away from any of the grading services that we accept. It's just saying that the cards that we review and end up getting a sticker, it is what it is. So no, I wouldn't say that. A lot of the cards that we see that can't get a sticker sit fine within the definition of those grading services standards. So there isn't like, wow, this is an abortion, and how did this get in a holder? We're not going around going, look at this problem. We don't do that. So
yeah, I couldn't imagine that you would. Vintage Card Collector says, have you considered placing your diamond sticker on the back of the slab like PWCC does with their eye appeal sticker? I don't care for the look of it on the front.
No, honestly, what we've learned from the dealers that are using us is that it actually helps recognize the cards that have the awesome eye appeal or have the sticker, have the diamond in their booth, in their display case, and it brings the attention to that and starts a wider conversation. And so it may not be the most aesthetic to some, but people are using us. They love it. They love the packaging. They love how a guy will walk by their booth and they'll see it, and then it ignites the conversation.
Yeah, I understand that some people might not like it on the front, but I think more people will like it than dislike it. That's just my gut feel, but that doesn't mean anything really. Corey Carr says, hello. Well, hello, Corey, and happy Saturday to you. John says, most modern card altering is due to card grading companies existing. Grading is destroying the hobby, not making it better. It encourages fraud. Furthermore, PSA authenticated many altered cards. This is a circular discussion now, Mike, because we addressed this earlier on in the episode where you said, well, the bad actors caused the need for it. And now you're saying that the need for it causes the bad actors. Yeah. I don't think John is completely wrong here. I think it does encourage it, it doesn't encourage, it rewards it, which is an encouragement. So it's kind of the same thing, but do you just want to, any additional thoughts that you didn't mention earlier that come to mind with this one?
I think it's just incumbent upon all the grading services to make sure that they're on point, that, hey, if that's the case, you got to do your job to the best of your ability and ensure that cards that are deemed not to get in a holder don't get in a holder, and the cards that can, you stand by. That's my short answer for that.
Sounds good to me. Okay, let's we're going to do and then we're going to bring Damien on momentarily here, and we're going to learn more about the company. But first of all, I want to bring up Indy Shack's comment here. Card grading is simply a natural evolution of the hobby, similar to what happened with coins years prior. As values increase, people need more assurance about what they're buying. And we don't only see it in cards and collectibles. We see it in the stock market as well. You know, after the whole Enron thing went down and you had the rise of the Sarbanes-Oxley Act and other things that caused for a more scrutiny of what companies can report. It's going to go that way. And then there's bad actors that just are looking for ways to cheat the system. It doesn't really matter what we do in the hobby or elsewhere. These things are going to happen. And that causes, like you just said, Mike, where the hobby, the professionals in the hobby providing these professional services need to be on their toes. I think it kind of just stops there. And I think we can switch the topic now. Tons of comment. I mean, that comment right there is already, 20 minutes old. So we're going to switch it up right now. And I'm going to just have to skip a bunch of these, but thanks everyone. Right. Great comments. As always, Yankees fan, I want to thank you for the 200 episode of Sports Cards Live. Congratulations. Thank you, Yankees fan, for that. Okay, Mike, I want to just talk a bit more about NBA Diamond, the company. And I want to know, what was the catalyst? Like how did the company start? Was Damien involved from the beginning? Was he a buddy? Were you guys having coffee or beers one day? And, let's start an eye appeal service. Like, how did the company, what was the catalyst to start it? What was the spark?
The catalyst started with, it's actually been an ongoing conversation for years, like, or probably 15, 20 years, actually. The conversation heated up in 17, 18, when we really got serious about, hey, there's a need for this. Let's put our heads together and let's see how we can, launch this and get it out there and really make a difference in highlighting, awesome eye appeal cards that can qualify as a sticker or a diamond. So, and that's really the catalyst that started it. Seeing what in the coin world, there's a sticker called CAC, and they've been around since I think like 2012 or 2013, and it was wildly successful to the point where PCGS reweighted their registry with cards that have a sticker. So if you have a CAC certified sticker on a PCGS coin, you got more GPA points within the set registry for coins. So, in a perfect world, I'd love some point in the future, or maybe it'll never happen, I don't know, but to have PSA do the same. That would be awesome. That would be a great conversation,
Yeah.
Wherever it goes, I don't know.
And you've said that eye appeal has always been there, and cards with superior eye appeal have always sold for more, often based on centering. But it seems to me like the eye appeal discussion and maybe it's just, you know, the discussion of everything is more apparent now with there being so much more social media activity in our hobby. But, you know, was iAppeal something that was discussed in the very beginning of your day during your time at PSA? Was iAppeal a discussion topic right away and how to factor it into grading?
Yes. I mean, honestly, without having the half point grade, that's what I was saying, you know, at the beginning of the show. If a card that was technically a 7.5, maybe in today's standards, but it was centered, it might get a bump to an 8 because of that. And so, yeah, iAppeal definitely carried a conversation. If the card was, you know, off center, it wouldn't be in the discussion. But, you know, great cards, if we could fight for great cards and they could go into, you know, without having a half grade, it could go into a higher grade. We tried for sure.
Okay. No, good stuff. Couple comments here. Jeremy from Collectors League says MBA does make a difference on sales, and Jeremy works at Heritage Auctions now, so he would have some data on that. Jeremy, welcome to the show. Deep Value Investor says, if you watch Pawn Stars, you can see how much technology is used to authenticate autos. It's scary. Well, the one thing you're missing, Brent, is that they don't show everything. There's a lot more that goes on behind the scenes before their expert is going to render his opinion. Don't believe everything you see on TV, Brent. You're missing the bigger picture, my friend. David French says, Mike, do you know anything about SBC? Do you know what SBC is or was?
Yeah, they were before SGC. So okay. SBC was one of the earlier competitors to PSA. So I think they were in business for a couple of years or however many years, and then it became SGC. So yeah, absolutely, I remember.
Tell us about your partner, Damien. What's his last name?
Warner.
Damien Warner. So how long have you and Damien known each other and been in business together? We've
known each other since the late 90s. We have a mutual friend actually that worked at PSA. His name is Danny Fisher, and Danny Fisher was a great customer service guy and became a grader actually. And he would always talk about this guy that was a Navy SEAL at the time. And I had to meet him and blah, blah, blah. Ironically, in my cubicle at PSA, I had the SEAL Team 8 operating principles on my desk. I just taped up, you know, kind of some goals and stuff you look at. And the first operating principle for SEAL Team 8 is when putting a team together, experience is the key criteria. And so when I ended up meeting him, it was like, wow, this he's got a lot of bandwidth, a lot of knowledge, and you know, I respect him. He's my brother. You know, ironically, we share the same birthday too. So there's some weird star stuff going on there too. So yes,
that's pretty neat. All right, cool. So why don't we meet Damien? I know he's there, and we said we were going to bring him on. I thought we'd get to him earlier, but the chat's just lit up tonight. Often is, but thank you to everybody in the chat for all your questions and comments. But I want to ask, so Damien is the CEO of the company. You're the director of grading. Yep. I do have some questions for him, how just, you know, certain things to do with maybe eBay and PWCC and partnerships that you guys are doing. So why don't we swap him in, because he's in the room with you, is my understanding. Yep. I saw some shadows earlier.
Let me change out.
All right, let's bring on Damien. Mike will be rejoining everybody. We'll get back to comments. We will probably go into overtime tonight as well, because Mike said he's willing to stick around as long as we'd like him to. Welcome, Damien, to the show now. Damien.
Hey, Jeremy, thank you very much.
Yeah, you bet.
I thought you guys could talk all night.
Good to have you. Good to meet you. For anybody who's watching right now, it says Mike Baker there, but this is no longer Mike Baker. I'm actually going to change that for people that might come in later, and I'm just going to put Damien in there, and we will go back to Mike Baker a little bit later when we're done. But Damien, so first of all, tell us a bit about your hobby history and you know, what led you to go to work with Mike.
Well, my hobby history started back probably when I was 11 years old, 1984. I wasn't a big sports guy. But somehow I figured out that these kids were trading cards, and I heard they were selling cards at these shows and making money. And I like money. And so I started figuring out that there was an ability to go and buy cards and make money. And it really became more of an entrepreneurship for me back in the mid 80s. not so much as a sports love, and understanding that this is a market that I understand very well. You know, I don't invest in stocks. I invest in cards. And that's where I started, you know, back in the early 80s, just watching guys collect cards and love sports, and grew up in the outskirts of Chicago. So, you know, I love the Cubs, love the Bears. So I love teams that just can't seem to get it out of the hole. But it is where it is. That's where it all started. And I met Mike, I'd say had to be 2001, 2000. Like you said, Danny Fisher introduced us. I figured out that grading was another avenue to make money in cards. And I have a great eye. Mike has taught me even more. I've probably taught him even more about modern cards because Mike loves vintage. I don't know if I love modern and ultra modern as much as everybody else does, but I definitely keep in touch with everything on a daily basis. And, you know, back then it was about I could go on a show and spend $500, grade the cards, and sell them for $2,000. And to me, I'm a capitalist. You know, I like to make money. That's the truth.
You just mentioned that you don't invest in stocks. You invest in cards. There's
Yes.
a whole conversation out there in the hobby, a narrative, as we call it, that, you know, some people say cards can't be an investment. Some people say they can be an investment. There's all sorts of, I've done content on this before.
Mm-hmm.
You know, my thoughts are that it's really up to you. It's up to the person spending their money if they want to look at it as an investment or not. It's not up to anybody else to tell me if I'm investing in a card or if I'm just, you know, if you know anything about accounting, anytime you buy a card, the credit goes to cash.
That's
or
right.
however you're paying, and the
Absolutely.
debit is either going to go to an expense or to an asset. Those are the only two options. It's either going to your P&L or your profit and loss statement, your income statement as an expense, or it's going onto your balance sheet as an asset. It has to go to one of those two places. Some cards I buy, Damien, go straight to the income statement. Others go to my balance sheet because I consider them investments. What's your take on that?
Well, here's my take. I would say anybody that wants to invest in collectibles, and I know these collectibles in sports memorabilia. I think ultra modern is super, super high risk. It's no different than, you know, I have friends that are stockbrokers and are selling high-end, you know, stocks that have potential high gains. And maybe you die. You put 100 grand in it and you lose all 100. And if you hit it, then you make $1 million. I think that's ultra modern. I don't invest in ultra modern. I don't invest in the guys that are playing. I have a rule of thumb. I've been doing this for almost 4 decades. And I don't believe that if you're still alive, that I invest in you. And that's the truth. I think that I invest in players that have already passed away and are secure, and and I think the reward is not as much, but I can prove over here a nice statistic that is Mickey Mantle. I've been following Mickey Mantle since the 80s. Mickey Mantle is an 18.5 return on your money. Any Mickey Mantle standard Topps card in almost every grade. Tell me where you're going to get 18.5 on your money.
Yeah.
You have to just know the market that you're in. I don't know comics. You know, I don't know Star Wars figures. I know guys that know, you know, all these other different collectibles. When you know your market, whatever it is, you can make money in it. Yeah. But you got to be wise. And hey, if you want to risk it, you can put money on, you know, Patrick Mahomes, and then all of a sudden you make 4,000%. I rather make 18.5 every year than make 4,000% because I'll tell you, I can't pick Patrick Mahomes. You know, I'm a Chicago's Bears fan, and look what Justin Fields just did.
Yeah, no, you know what I mean. So a couple of things there. First of all, Michael Jordan is still alive, so there must be exceptions to your rule. I have to think there's exceptions to your rule. The other thing I'll say is that. And actually, I just saw a comment, a couple of comments that do speak to this. So first, Cage Lawyer Minion says, I think if it's an investment, it depends on how much you got in at. Well, so at first I thought he was going to say how much you have in it, which I would agree with, because it's going to be different for everybody.
Right.
But how much you got in at, I don't think that's it at all personally. But Deep Value says the same guys saying cards are not an investment today were buying into the top in 2020, 2021. And that's what I agree with, because we hear people saying that cards can't be an investment. Look what they've done over the last 3 years. And I've been in this for over 40 years myself, and done pretty well as far as my holdings go. But people just say I'm lucky I got in early. Well, I've been looking at this for a very long time. So
That's right.
I just kind of snicker when I hear the commentary that people say cards can't be an investment anymore. The other thing that people like to say is that, well, they don't pay dividends, they don't spin off rental income. Well, let me tell you, capital gains are a type of investment revenue or income. So you don't have to, it doesn't have to have dividends to be an investment. The other thing is that they're an alternative investment. They're not regulated, all this stuff. So, but to be an investment, you just have to buy something with the intention of making money on it, selling it for more down the road. Anyway, that's a different discussion.
I love it. The truth is, it's been 3.5 decades of loving sports, and then understanding the history of baseball and football and everything else. I mean, there's a lot that comes with this too. Which if you buy stocks, you don't get that with a company. No, it's a whole other episode, Damien. We can do it at a later date. Deep Value says ultra modern cards are stock options. I like that. He's right.
They are, and they're just super risky too, in my opinion, from an investment perspective. But hey, collect the players that you like. There's a whole narrative of Deep Value likes to say that nobody likes this quarterback class. Okay. I want to hear a bit about. Oh, actually, we're going to do this first. The professor put this up. Can Damien fill in the blank? MBA has an address at Tigard. Well, first of all, your office, the MBA office is in the PWCC facility. That's clear and widely known, correct?
The PWCC facility is 3 different buildings, and we are in one of the buildings. We are not in the vault building, which we call it. We're in a building called Bridgeport, which is within 300 feet. I mean, we're in a different building. But yes, we're in the operational building where they do all of the ingestion for what they call the RCI. And then there's other offices in there where their accounting and some other stuff is done in there for the most part.
Can you explain to us what is the business arrangement between MBA Diamond and PWCC and like pre and post the Fanatics acquisition of PWCC, and how that has impacted your business and your relationship and your location even within the PWCC facility or one of them?
Sure. So our location hasn't changed from when it was Fanatics purchased PWCC to today. Our Diamond service is a sole service for the collectors. It's offered to everybody. That is not an exclusive to PWCC. They have their AES sticker. We look at a lot of cards in the vault for a lot of top-end clients, which has been very beneficial to the clients because a lot of cards that we look at that are pulled out are 25 and up. And nobody wants to ship them. So we are able to go over there, pull them out of the vault. They have a room for us to review those for the Diamond service. Now, the exclusive service that we have with them, that is the RCI service. That is the raw service. And that's why we came out here to Tigard and moved the office out here to facilitate giving a auction platform, i.e. PWCC, the ability to give the consumer the trust that they are getting an authentic card, an unaltered card, and a card that we give a heat map to. And our heat map it's definitely not as technical as tag, okay? But it is not done by an AI system. It is done by Mike or myself, or can learn together depending on the value of the card, looking at it, and then giving what we believe in our zones. So we have 6 on the front, 6 on the back, 4 on the front on the corners, 4 on the back on the corners, and then we have 10 zones, 12 zones on the edges on front and back. So that's 24. And we highlight those zones if we believe that anything 8.5 below. So imagine a damage report in that zone only, meaning a rub corner or something. We're going to highlight it. The great thing that PWCC's done, and you highlighted it earlier, is that their scans and the pictures that we're taking for raw cards, they're selling for 10, 15, 20. Sometimes there's, $10,000, $15,000 raw cards selling. But the scans that they're giving you, and they're not scans, they're taken by cameras, the quality of that and being able to really look at the corner, and we highlight it, you can look at it and go, okay, I see exactly what they're looking at. We don't say what the centering is. We let you determine that. But then you can determine without any question what you would like to pay for the card. You're getting an authentic card. It's unaltered. And if it is mini size, we changed it 6 months ago. We actually put mini 0 on the top of the label, meaning that the card does not measure by standards. Now, when we say that, if we think it's altered, we will give it an altered designation, meaning that if we think it's been trimmed. But if we think it's a standard card that came out, because we got a lot of complaints where guys were saying modern cards had come out and they'd be like, hey, these cards are right out of a pack. They came from a breaker and they're small. And they are small. They don't measure. And if you sent them to some of the grading companies, maybe they grade, maybe they don't, depending on, how value the card is. But so we changed that. So now we'll tell you that, hey, the card size is small, but that we believe the card's unaltered. And if there's any damage, we give you that. And we stand behind that. If you were to buy a card out of PWCC Marketplace and send it to their partners, and their partners are CGC and Beckett and SGC, and if Beckett or any 3 of those companies were to come back and disagree with us, we'll take a look at it. And if we made a mistake or we really think that it was blatantly wrong, or we'll send it back to get graded, you're going to get your money back. So the difference on the buying raw cards currently right now on PWC Marketplace compared to eBay is eBay, if you buy a card over $250, they're going to send it to somebody to tell you that it's authentic. But that's it. It doesn't tell you that it's small. It doesn't tell you that it's altered. It doesn't tell you anything else besides it's authentic. And I know there's plenty of people that are maybe even watching this right now or have experienced this, that they bought a card that was $1,000. They got it from eBay with their guarantee. And then they got it and they said, this card, they sent it to PSA. They sent it to SGC. They sent it to CSG. They sent it to Beckett. And they said the card was altered. By the time all that had happened, you can't get your money back anymore, because they changed the whole loophole that if you don't dispute it within 72 hours instead of the 60 and 90 days, which guys were using, to try to buy all the baseball players and then return them, because, everybody has to have a game in every industry. It's not just ours. It became a problem. And it's not that eBay is not trying to do a good thing, but we're trying to do something better. And
I was going to ask you to describe the difference between what you do authenticating a card and the eBay authentication process and service that they offer. You're speaking to that right now, but I just want to be certain to let you know that was going to be a question, and if you could, address it completely. Not that you're not, but I just want to make sure you do.
Matter of fact, the truth is that Mike would tell you that it would be easier for him to grade the card with a numeric number than it is what we're doing. What we're actually doing by not even giving you the numeric grade is more difficult and more time consuming by doing this. But what we believe we do, and we believe this even when we started NBA and the original Diamond service and looking at, I heard you, do we grade the graders? At the beginning, me and Mike talked about this. And the reality of it is that we didn't want to say, we're grading the graders. But the reality of it is we are grading the graders. And I don't understand why everybody would not like a second opinion. And they do want a second opinion, even though they say they don't, because you know what they really want is they want that report card. Because when you get that report card, that's that real validated of second opinion that somebody just giving you a numerical grade. So we've tried to do that and then put it back in the consumer's hand to make the determination by giving them a video, by giving them a high-end res scan, by giving them a heat map to bid accordingly and be very comfortable on what they're going to spend. And the the partnership that we have with PWCC, we're really happy with. We're really excited. We don't know exactly, because I know the question probably from you would be like, where's Fanatics going to go? We don't know that yet. We know we're staying where we are. That we know that. We don't know where the growth is. We don't know what their plans are. And if I did know, I would let them communicate that to the public before we would. But we're not going anywhere. I'll tell you that the service that we still offer for them will continue, and we're happy.
How do you guys kind of live in the same ecosystem with your diamond as PWCC does with its eye appeal? I know the answer to this, but I'll ask it anyway. Are you providing the PWCC eye appeal opinions?
No.
Or it's somebody else? It's somebody else.
It's somebody else.
It's somebody else. How do you coexist with them and not overlap, or in the case of a disagreement where they've given the sticker, the eye appeal, and now it's coming to you and you say, we don't know. How do you handle those types of situations?
Well, that has happened, Jeremy. That has definitely happened, and happened on cards that are $100,000. And the truth is that they are giving an eye appeal sticker. Okay, so what I want to make very clear is that the NBA Diamond service is not an eye appeal service. It is a secondary service that we are evaluating the grade within the grade at those standards with eye appeal attributes. Okay, so the card is getting re-looked at again. And the truth is that if we really believe that we looked at a card in a holder and we believe that it was trimmed, we're not going to give it an eye appeal sticker. We're not going to tell you we don't like the top edge. Okay, that's the truth. We're not going to tell you we think it's trimmed or anything else. We're going to tell you that it is X, Y, and Z. We are giving a second opinion to people that want to know what the cards really are. And I guess I would ask the community. I love the community. I love this hobby. Is a one and out? Is that what everybody wants? I don't know if I believe that. I've been doing this 3.5 decades. And if one and out was the truth, then the truth would be that when you got your card graded, you would never crack it out. And crackouts they happen all the time. They happen on a very religious basis. And so they believe that they can get a better grade or not. I always say that if somebody gets a PSA 10 or a BGS 9.5 or an SGC 10, and they thought they were going to get a 9, they're not complaining. But they'll complain when they get a 9 and they thought they were going to get a 10. But they would be more than glad to sell that card, even though in their heart they thought it was a 9, they got a better grade. So, I put the onus back on everybody else, because the hobby is only as strong as we are as collectors, and we trust and we embrace each other. That's it.
Collectors,
and that's what NBA is trying to do. Is
collectors and investors?
Everybody in the hobby. I always say this all the time. And the reason that we are very transparent, and 3 years ago when we started this, when me and Mike decided to do this, Mike was pretty reluctant to put his name on the company. And I told him I wouldn't do it with him unless he did. And I'll tell you, I did that because there's two things. We're not standing behind shadows. Mike's name's on it. We're very proud of what we do, and we love what we do, and we communicate with everybody. And we find that being transparent and having good conversations, sometimes rough conversations with people, still comes out the better side and makes the much healthier hobby. And that's really what we want at the end of the day. We want a healthy business and a healthy hobby.
Appreciate that comment for sure. Stukes Baseball says, great guest tonight. Very nice. Deep Value says, man, I love how Damien just owns his capitalism and likes to make money from cards. So many ways to be involved in this hobby. No doubt about it. The professor is calling you on I think just using a word. He says, you said that PWCC gives a scan, but you previously said it was a high-res photograph from a camera. Did you just slip in the word? I wouldn't have brought this up, but I want to because other people see this. I feel like you just said scan, interchangeably.
A Floridian trip, but they are taken with a camera.
Yeah,
those are high res camera pictures. They are not scans. They're not laid on a scanning bed. They are taken on, and that's why the quality through all PWCC is so unbelievable, because they're done with a camera.
What other sort of, or any news, any NBA news you want to let us know about? Any upcoming announcements that you can share? Other strategic partnerships? Anything else going on?
Well, we've definitely been talking to a lot of people. The Nationals, you brought it up with Mike. The Nationals is our third Nationals. It was really good for us, and good for us on a point that we kind of did a change on our view on how we price point from the years prior. We had a price point that we charged people in X, Y, and Z, and then if they didn't get a sticker, they were out of the money on the value of the card. We basically said it was $20 for what we called a Diamond Quick Review. And as long as it's stickered, then you had to pay the upcharge. And when we talk about an upcharge, our upcharge for $1 million card is $200. It's not $20,000 or $10,000. So I don't know, when we bring up an upcharge, we have a little bit of an upcharge to look at high value cards just so we can get them out. And we debuted it at National. I don't know if you saw that. We are definitely looking at going to a holder, and we're in the process. The whole system on the back end is done.
So a holder to put an existing slab in, like another company slab?
No, we're looking at doing a complete holder for NBA for raw cards into a graded holder.
So basically becoming a grading company.
Correct.
And putting a numerical grade and publishing your standards, and in which case no more need, or would there still be a need for the sticker? I guess if you're going using it.
Actually, what you're going to find is that the way that the sticker works, the standards that are going to sit very similar to the PSA standards. Mike was very involved in writing that, and then pretty much had the final say in where it went. And so, everything in Mike's mind sits, very entailed in where PSA is still even to this day. Our goal for a holder is not to look for the high end. We don't want a 52 Mantle 9. If you were to send that to us, I am not going to want to put that in our holder. And I'll be dead honest. I will help you go down to PSA and put that in a holder where it belongs. We want to create a holder that is at the right price point with the right turnaround time, that has a credible company backing behind it, that the normal consumers every day are working with the $5,000 cards below, that works. We're not looking for the big cards. I'm not looking for the big, hey, somebody sent us this X, Y, and Z. We want, but we think that right now there's an opportunity out there for other people to want to use other services and turn around, and maybe a little more transparency too. Because with what will happen too is with our holder is you're going to get the same heat map that we're doing with the raw cards. So you're going to get that information on where the problems are and X, Y, and Z. So it's going to be a little bit more transparent that's going on out there. So that's where we are right now. We're not, the holder is, we're trying to figure it out. Me and Mike have been doing this for a long time, and we want to make a holder that is efficient and good looking, and not over the top, and not cheap either. Yeah. So, and that's, it doesn't happen overnight. And, anybody that's ever been in any manufacturing business, it takes a little time, but we're continuing on with our diamond service. we have our service with PWCC. We might be opening that service up to other companies. We're in some talks with some other companies, i.e. auction houses, to do that. And they like what we're doing, just to give some people some transparency. So
nice.
Those are some of the future points that we got, Jeremy.
Well, Vintage Card Collector says we don't need any more grading companies. And that's like saying we don't need any more restaurants. Like, you can't stop competition. But I understand the sentiment, but I think it's one that is just like, you know, you're not gonna stop there being more services and more offerings and more businesses coming up with the hobby being as strong as it is. But I understand the sentiment, but yeah, I just think that's all it is a sentiment for sure at this point. Jeremy at Collectors League and Heritage says the 1977 Topps Luke Skywalker sticker and card in the upcoming Star Wars Heritage auction have NBA stickers. Both cards should break records. A little plug there by Jeremy for his company, Heritage Auctions.
Those two cards, Jeremy, if anybody's watching this that is a 1977 Star Wars collectors, I personally, and me, Mike, when you talk about cards that get the looks, these cards are the best of the best if you're looking to buy it. These are the ones. Nothing exists better out there than these two cards that they're auctioning right now.
The professor says, I cannot find the definition of heat map on the MBA or PWCC website. Can you direct me? Is there anything that you can respond to?
So this is a little confusion, and I understand this with the hobbyists asking. We don't, because the PWCC Marketplace, what we do for them, and we call in the heat map, it was an exclusive to them. And because of that, we never marketed it on NBADiamond.com. It was not a product that was available to anybody but them, and still currently is theirs program that we use for them. So we never opened it up to do that. That was part of the agreement that PWCC was to market that, and they have marketed it. And I feel that, you know, anybody can do more marketing, but I thought they did a pretty good job if you buy through PWCC on what they're demonstrating through their raw cards when they brought them back. Because, Jeremy, you remember they used to sell raw cards, and then they went away from them for a while, and then they brought them back. And they brought us in. Yeah. So
Mark Santucci says food isn't the same as cards. Oh, thanks, tips. No, but they're both businesses, Mark. That was my point. Not what we're selling or buying or offering. The fact that there are industries surrounding these different offerings, these different products. Food is a product and grading is a product. Simple as that, Mark. Simple as that. Okay, well, thanks, Damien, for jumping in.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for everybody that's watching too. And, anybody that's very interested, please look us up at www.nbadiamond.com. And anybody that knows us or doesn't, give us a call at the office. You probably are going to get me or Mike. There's only 3 or 4 of us there. And we're more than glad to talk to anybody about their collections and their cards.
Appreciate it, Damien. Thanks for coming on. And
I'll throw it back to Mike here.
Sounds good. All right, so I just need to change the name again now that Mike Baker is back on the show. There we go. That should change over to Mike Baker. So, Mike, you've been sitting in the back there. I had a great conversation with Damien, by the way. Very well spoken. Seems to know what he's talking about.
Yep.
Anything kind of tweak your mind there when we were chatting? Anything you'd like to add, supplement, comments, anything at all?
No, I think he pretty much summed up what our goals are in the future, and we'll see. The one commenter that you had about another grading service, believe me, this conversation about going into a holder has been an ongoing one, and I think with the kind of governor on the engine relative to value, and we're not trying to escalate to be what the grading services are that you and I would agree that that's the big 4 or whatever. We're not targeting that. We're targeting the lower value stuff and try to create a price point that makes sense for those types of cards, and then create a customer experience that's a little bit better, a little bit different.
Yeah. Okay. Well, appreciate those additional comments. So let's change it up. I think we've covered we've covered most of what I wanted to talk about in terms of, you know, the early days at PSA when you were there, the evolution of well, let's just put a bow on the grading discussion and your thoughts on the state of grading right now, where it's at. You know, even your old employer at PSA has grown, you know, really, I don't want to say out of control because I'm not there. I don't see what's going on in their offices, but they have grown offices in three different offices, if not more than that now. You know, keeping control and maintaining consistency and quality, like that's where the hobby, that's where PSA is at today. We've seen the downfall of the Beckett brand in recent years, as far as the way they're perceived by the hobby. We've seen CGC now rebrand, come back as CGC, and seem to be growing. SGC has done some great things to grow their brand and the such. So your thought, and then of course we have tag grading now, who I'm affiliated with, who's taking the human out of it and making it an automated system. So there's consistency and reproducibility and no human bias, I'll call it, you know, for lack of a better term.
Yep.
Overall, how do you see the state of grading right now?
I think it's healthy. I mean, I really thought after COVID, we'd see a big tail off, and we have number wise, but if you look at the gem rate reports that come out monthly with the population data that are the aggregate data they're able to capture and show what the different grading services are doing, it's staggering, you know? So I think it's great. I think, I love the innovation, the money that, you know, you're affiliated with Tag. You guys poured a ton of money in to try to figure out how to add the technological capacity to scale in the lane that you guys are in. PSA scaling to New Jersey for a East Coast division, China, Japan. I mean, CGC or CSG, whatever, they have a new office I understand opened up in Asia. So, I mean, the growth is there, and TCG is powering a lot of that growth right now too, which is kind of we haven't even broached that topic, you know? So, I mean, if you look at the numbers from gem rate, I think it was like better than 50% of what PSA is getting is TCG. So that's crazy. Yeah. So, which is great. I mean, another area for people to get educated with what they're passionate about, and maybe it leads to traditional material that we would consider traditional, you know, hockey, baseball, whatever, and it brings out further investment for their collectors. I will say this, Jeremy, the sports collectibles industry has the largest platform than any collectible in the world. No one cares about, you know, I shouldn't say no one cares, but a coin that gets sold, it's just not mainstream. A stamp, you know, a piece of art, we might hear about it on a blip on a news article, but we're on a 24-hour news cycle with ESPN, ESPN2, ESPN News, you know, and every day a record could be cracked, and every day something could happen, and we're seeing it live. So if there's any collectible industry out there, it's ours that has the go to Mars type of mission, you know? I mean, yeah. Sky's the limit.
So when we met the other day, you mentioned the card porn name came up in our discussion. Yeah. And you had some thoughts on that. So just to kind of, you know, segue out of the grading piece and get your thoughts on the state of the hobby, where things are at, a little bit of that. There's a couple of questions I wanted to talk about with you. So I wanted you to elaborate on, you know, what your thoughts were on card porn and what that means. What you know, the trajectory of card porn being the watchdog, shouting, you know, calling out bad actors and hanky-panky, to becoming the baddest of actors and the hankiest of panky. And also, so I want you to talk about that. I also want to talk about the market and how it did explode during COVID and your thoughts on that, because you alluded to me, you mentioned COVID had something to do with it, but not everything. So I want to get into those two topics. We're in overtime now. We're over the 2-hour mark, but we're going to take a bit more time here. Let's start with the card porn discussion that you brought up to me, and just curious what's on your mind when it comes to that.
Disappointing. I mean, when card porn started, you know, he had actually reached out to us on Instagram and asking. He was very inquisitive about what our NBA Diamond service was about, and I felt like there was some, you know, understanding about what we're doing, and then shortly thereafter, it was more meme stuff. I think he just played the line of what the collecting community was when we first started, and it was like grading the graders, a money grab, whatever it may be, and then his platform became quite effective and large to basically he could decimate a company by saying you suck or whatever, and he had a lot of power, or that Instagram account had a lot of power, and so it was leveraged, and no one wanted to get on his bad side. Everybody wanted to like kind of play ball, because boy, if you get on card porn's bad side, that could be the death of your brand. And because social media is so powerful these days. And we just stay true to what we do. And hey, the memes, the naysayers, they're going to do what they do. I told you in that same conversation the other day that, I grew up in this where grading wasn't allowed, or people hated grading. People hated, the conspiracy theories of what they believe was population control or doing things you should be doing or whatever it may be. So like the naysayers are always going to be there. If you're doing 100% right, something's probably wrong. Doing 100% wrong, something's definitely wrong. So the reality is that to have it come to light now, and shout out to a lot of the platforms that are out there that have reported this. AIH Sports, Neo Sports Cards and Comics, Jeff Wilson, SCR, all you guys are out there trying to hold the industry accountable. And if it wasn't for that guy in China who was able to, determine that photoshopped image of Michael Jordan's photo matched jersey wasn't in fact photo matched, we would never have known. And, kudos to the hobby for doing the extra work, and then, having platforms to get out there and talk about it and bring things to light. And, I feel good about that. At least there's some light at the end of the tunnel with what happened.
So I got to jump in and just say, you mentioned me along with others there. I don't look at myself as a hobby watchdog. I'm not a hobby. That's not my content. I'm interviewing and I call auctions. Yeah. I'm not that. So if any of those guys are watching right now and they're thinking, what does he mean? Jeremy doesn't do that. Just I do. I bring something else to the table. I watch a lot of those guys. Yeah. I pay attention to what they're talking about so I can stay somewhat informed, but I don't report the news, and I don't provide watchdog content, but I discuss certain issues as they arise.
That's where I was coming from, the issues that arise. That's what I meant relative to your platform for sure.
Yeah. I appreciate that. Just wanted to clarify in case those guys are watching, so they don't think that I think that I'm one that I'm doing that kind of watchdog stuff. And listen, you just said that a lot of companies wanted to stay off of card porn's radar because they could take you down. Card porn could take you down with one post for the most part. Yeah. Now that card porn is gone, which is obviously a good thing because card porn wasn't what they were portraying themselves as. It was actually the exact opposite of it. And now I think that what this has done is it's caused the hobby to be much more skeptical of the next group or the next watchdog. And the hobby's going to, I think, should at least demand certain transparency from watchdogs nowadays, because we learned that lesson. Just like Enron caused the need for different evolution of financial reporting, and and I hate to say it, but it's a fact, just like 9/11 caused more airport security and that kind of thing, right? Like it takes something bad to almost force evolution and progress. And maybe there is a silver lining to the whole card porn thing, in that the next watchdogs will actually be pure and not bad actors, hanky-panky players themselves, to take a term from AIH, who is among the watchdogs out there. So okay, well, I just wanted to get your thoughts on that, because you did bring it up the other day. The market itself, you have a bit of a unique view, I think, on, not unique, but you're not simply saying, well, COVID and people staying home and going to their basements and digging up old hobbies. I think that is I think you recognize that is part of why the hobby exploded. And at the pandemic really took hold in the spring, summer of 2020, and the hobby blew up, really at the end of 2020, Q1 of 2021 was the peak. Your thoughts on, why did the market explode over the past few years outside of COVID?
Because I think what COVID did, it brought a lot more attention and highlighted people who had collections, who had more interest in getting into this hobby. It was on the news. I mean, like you couldn't, sports cards as a whole, the collectible, hobby, this jersey sold for that shoe sold for this card sold for that. There's so much information. So I thought what that did was bring more people into the hobby, even when COVID mellowed out. And granted, the grading totals, they're not doing, 5 million cards, every quarter or whatever it may be, but there's still a healthy submissions are coming in. The market didn't die. It didn't fall off. It did fall off relative to ultra modern, but vintage is kicked up. So it ebbs and flows, and I think the interest is there. And as I said earlier, our hobby has the biggest platform, to keep a healthy heartbeat. And, there's going to be blips where things take a little speculative stock option, ultra modern type hit. But like Damien alluded to with vintage, that stuff is, the guys that are passed away, or like a Michael Jordan, the exception to the rules, guys like that, those guys are healthy, provided that nothing bad happens to them, relative to any type of scandal.
Right.
Those things affect collector perception and what they really want to have in their collection. I mean, if a guy does something wrong and he's a total, he's a bad actor or whatever it may be, you don't want him in your collection. Most guys don't. So
like OJ Simpson's a good example of that one, huh?
OJ Simpson's a good example of what you would want or not want in your collection.
Right. I, as time has gone by, I think more and more people are now adding OJ Simpson back into their collection, or at least want that, his rookie card. Speaking of that, I'm curious, Mike, you've been grading cards since the beginning of grading. What is your favorite important vintage card?
For me personally, I'm a Gehrig fan. So, getting and I love the Gaudy set. So 33 Gaudy Gehrig is great. The Babe Ruths are awesome. I have a fond affection for the T206 redback Cobb and greenback Cobb. I also like, totally off the mark collectible wise, or in my mind, I love it. It's a 50 Bowman Ted Williams. So I just love the pose, and, I don't know. For me, it works,
Tell me, so that you've talked about baseball. Give me your favorite iconic, important vintage basketball, football, and hockey card.
65 Namath, 69 Alcindor. Hockey card. Me personally, I love the test copy of the OR. I love the white letters, the yellow letters, the test copies. I like kind of that eclectic, esoteric type of collectability or whatever. But there's a special place for me with that stuff for sure.
Nice. Very good. Very good. All right. Well, listen, we've covered the topics in my notes. We've covered, I think we did a pretty good job of getting through everything that we wanted to. We were able to address, I'd say, most of the comments, and there was a point there to everyone in the chat where it was just too much and I had to kind of skip ahead. So a couple more minutes, we can go for a few more minutes here. If anybody wants to maybe repost a question from earlier, I may or may not select it. We'll see. Oh, Jeremy wants to know any your favorite non-sport. Oh, I have my favorite is, it's probably obvious. Well, not obvious, but it's a lot of people's favorite. Your favorite non-sport vintage card.
Maybe the Batman, Superman. Shout out to Jeremy at Heritage Auctions for his TCG category. All the Star Wars cards that Damien and you were talking about earlier. Those cards are really, really difficult condition wise. And when they get a PSA 10 on top of it, and it gets a gold NBA diamond sticker, I mean, that really, in our opinion, is the best of the best for sure.
So your favorite would be like the 1966 Black Batman and the 1940. So I forget the name of the menu. Is it
Superman? World Gum, I think it is.
World. I mean, the Superman. That is, I love that. I have a nice 1966 Black Batman, which is a beautiful. I have I just picked up the Robin not too long ago, the Canadian version to go along with it. Beautiful cards. Beautiful cards. Okay, couple of quick. Mark Santucci, do you have any San Jose Sharks cards? And do you have any Kiss cards?
I don't, but Give me a few weeks, and I'll probably have to. Now you're going to spark my interest.
There you go. There you go. All right. So, well, we're going to wrap up, Mike. Thanks a lot. Swamp Donkey says, love the discussion, gentlemen. Much appreciated. Well, thank you, Swamp Donkey. I don't think I've seen you around these parts before, but glad to have you. If anyone is new to this channel, because we've got Mike Baker and Damien from MBA on, please feel free to come back. Check out the library of interviews that I've done, and feel free to subscribe to the channel as well. I would greatly appreciate it. I bring you interviews just about every Saturday night with industry insiders, passionate collectors, other content creators, and even more. I would say Mike Double V, boatloads of info tonight. Thank you so much, Mike. Hockey Barn says this is one of the top 3 interviews to date. Mike, that says a lot. This is 200, and I've done more. I've done other shows that have 80 and 60 episodes too. So out of all my content, if this is a top 3 interview, that's saying a lot. Thank you, Hockey Barn, for that comment. That's really nice. We do have a few more comments that are coming in. Mike Petty answer. Mike Petty. That's good, Mike Petty. I don't know who he was asking. Mark Santucci says, good show, 5 stars out of 5. I Collect Ichiro is there. Great show. Tony, thanks for being here. Appreciate your comments. It's a great interview. Mike, all right, so listen, I'm going to do my thank yous. First of all, chat, you guys, thank you so much for this tonight. Mike, this has been great. I knew we'd have a good episode tonight, so thanks to you and Damien for taking the time, your willingness to share, be transparent, and just, speak to your experience. I think you provided some grip. And we had some breaking news here tonight, too, that MBA is likely, if not for sure, going to be starting up a full-out grading company. That might be breaking news here tonight on the show. So thanks for sharing that here with us. I appreciate that, Mike. Thank you, Mike Petty. Another great Saturday Night Show. Thank you, Sports Card 613. Michael Stone, thank you so much. Mike Baker, I'm going to give you an opportunity to say goodbye to the chat and have some parting words.
It was a pleasure being a part of the 200th episode. I loved how you looked up what 200 means in his diamonds. So it's fortuitous. I love the comment where the guy said it's a top 3 interview. I appreciate your time and your platform. Great job.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. It was great to meet you in person at the National. Look forward to meeting Damien at an upcoming industry event, whether it's the National or somewhere else. Again, chat, thank you so much. If you're not yet subscribed, take a moment to do so. And all past episodes of Sports Cards Live are available on podcasts where you listen to your favorite podcasts, as this one will be as well within about a half an hour's time from now. So with that, this 200th episode of Sports Cards Live is now over. Thank you, everybody, for everything, and good night.